Death is a curious concept. It's crazy how much we can be desensitized to it after seeing it in a fictionalized program a bit too much. Doctor Who is generally a family show, but sometimes it has had moments where it goes a bit further than what you'd expect, and some of these moments come from the claws of Death's icy grip. So today, I'll be counting down my updated top 10 most horrifying Doctor Who deaths. This is a remake of a video I did a couple of years ago, but got taken down, so I decided to give it another shot. So without further ado, let's get to it. Number 10. Shockeye, the Two Doctors. Shockeye, an androgram chef, was one of the more interesting antagonists to come out of the Colin Baker era, but he was also oddly memorable. A murderous man with a yearning for human flesh, he attempted to eat Jamie McCrimmon. When the Sixth Doctor comes to the rescue, they have a little battle and a chase. However, his death is, while satisfying, certainly a controversial moment for 80s Who. The Doctor takes cyanide, puts a net around Shockeye, and graphically suffocates him in one of the most child-unfriendly villain deaths of the John Nathan Turner era. And of course there's a snappy one-liner to sort of lighten it up a bit, maybe, I don't know. Well, anyway, this won't be the last you see of the Colin Baker era on this list. Far, far from it. Number 9. Mestor, the Twin Dilemma. See? That didn't take long, did it? Well, from one Sixth Doctor villain to the other, the Twin Dilemma gets a bit of a bad rap, but it is unique in the way that it's the only time in the show's history that the last story of the season is a post-regeneration one. The pros and cons of this story, however, are a matter for another discussion. The antagonist of this story is Mestor, a massive slug creature that plans to use twins Romulus and Remus to solve equations needed to explode the sun of Gioconda and spread the gastropod eggs throughout the whole universe. And he did so with the assistance of Edgeworth. No, not Ace Prosecutor Miles Edgeworth, but aka Azmael, a renegade Time Lord. Hey guys, I made a pop culture reference, a niche one as well. Yay me, I think. Moving on. Mestor's death comes at the direct hand of the Sixth Doctor once again. He threatens to take over the Doctor's body and demonstrates his power by taking over Azmael, leaving his real body unconscious. Taking advantage of the opportunity, the Doctor throws a vial of acid at Mestor, causing his body to turn into a vile, bubbling, foam-spewing mess. Azmael, on his final incarnation, forces himself to regenerate to purge himself of Mestor's consciousness, destroying the creature's mind in his last breaths. A nasty end, both physically and psychologically, for the big old slug. Number 8. Lynda, with a Y, Parting of the Ways. On to the new series now, with the Series 1 finale, Parting of the Ways. Still one of the strongest Dalek stories ever made, in my humble opinion. Anyway, this death differs in the sense that it's the way that it's carried out that makes it particularly horrific. We focus on Lynda, with a Y, a Big Brother contestant that the Doctor met on the game station and called Sweet. In the ensuing Dalek invasion, she took up the role of tracking Dalek movement via the sensors. However, they find her. In a tense moment, they start to cut through the reinforced door, but in a horrible bait and switch moment, Lynda turns around to see multiple Daleks outside her section's window. Just from looking at the dome lights, you know what's coming. The Dalek shoots, the glass breaks, and we don't need to see what happens next. We just know that she's done for. By far one of the most depressing deaths in the series, as up till then, Lynda was a thoroughly well-developed and likeable character, assassinated in a pretty cruel way. Number 7. Varos guards. We're back to the Colin Baker era once again, and we have one of the most infamous moments of his tenure in Vengeance on Varos, the acid bath. Having been manipulated into thinking he was dying of thirst in the desert for the sake of reality TV, of sorts, the Doctor ends up ready for disposal in an acid bath which is being attended to by a couple of guards. When he wakes up, he spooks one of them, causing them to fall in and endure a particularly gruesome fate. The second guard and the Doctor struggle before the first guard crawls out of the acid, grabbing onto the second, trying to get out, but instead pours him in as well. This scene is incredibly infamous in the 80s and often has had Six being tarred as a murderer, but that really isn't the case, despite his fairly gruesome one-liners that really don't help matters. Number 6. Kane, Dragonfire. The controller of Iceworld, a trading colony on Svartos, Kane was rather cool. And by that I mean his body temperature was so low that it could kill with a touch, but was vulnerable to extreme heat and light. The reality is that Kane is a criminal and an exile from his homeworld of Paraman, and was imprisoned within Iceworld, which is in fact a spaceship, with a guarded Dragonfire, which is the power source for the ship. He had waited 3,000 years to cast revenge against his people, and following a chain of events that involved the 7th Doctor, Mel, Ace and Glitz, the chance was finally in his grasp. Unfortunately for Kane, by then it was much too late. The Doctor informs him that he is the last of his kind, his home planet and race having been obliterated by a supernova from the nearest star. The information is a bit too much for him to bear, and he commits suicide by allowing sunlight into the ship. We're treated to a massively disturbing scene of him in agony, with his face literally melting off a la Indiana Jones, with a brilliant practical effect. It's certainly quick, but it's also one of the most memorable effect shots of the JNT era. And what a way to go. Number 5. Katarina. Katarina, a companion to the First Doctor, is one of the most unfortunate souls to ever come aboard the TARDIS. A Trojan servant, she had a desire to reach the place of perfection. She travelled with the Doctor and Stephen for one of the bit serials, the Mythmakers, and naturally, the Daleks' master plan. But her fate didn't come at the hands of the Daleks. On the run from the Daleks, the team's ship crashes on a prison planet, Desperus. A prisoner, Kirkson, sneaks on board and takes Katarina hostage in the airlock, threatening her life unless they take him back to the planet Kemble, home to a Dalek city. Katarina nobly activates the airlock, sacrificing herself for the safety of her friends, being cast out into the vacuum of space to the distraught screaming of Stephen. This death is horrible in its rawness, suddenness, and devastating speed.
She didn't understand. She couldn't understand. She wanted to save our lives, and perhaps the lives of all the other beings of the solar system. I hope she's found her perfection. Oh, I shall always remember her as one of the daughters of the gods. Yes, as one of the daughters of the gods.
Number 4. Adelaide Brooke. The Waters of Mars is always an interesting episode to revisit due to the different layers of storytelling, mainly thanks to the characters, and probably now more than ever with the whole Time Lord Victorious thing going on. And one of the most iconic moments of this story comes from the death of the main companion for the episode, Adelaide Brooke. With the Doctor having bent the rules of time and saved the remains of a team on a base on Mars from their deaths that were set in stone, he goes mad with power. Adelaide is someone who has had the chance of life given back to her, but she actively chooses to reject that life. She shoots herself, taking her own life to restore the natural order of things, and to ensure that the Doctor does not go any further. Everything about this death is horrific. God knows what she was going through in that mind of hers in those last moments. It's a heartbreaking death, and a raw and bitter end to one of the darkest 10th Doctor stories. Number 3. Arthur Stengos, Revelation of the Daleks. This has got to be one of the most grotesque moments in Doctor Who for sure. Arthur Stengos, a friend of the Doctor, and one who had already died before the event of this episode, was unlucky enough to die twice. Before the Doctor got a chance to visit him in the funeral home of tranquil repose, his daughter Natasha and her friend Gregory attempt to retrieve his body. Eventually, they come across a glass shape of a Dalek, with a mess of organs amongst what resembles a human head. One that turns out to be Stengos, as he recognizes his daughter. He is in the process of mutating into a Dalek, which is the fate of every resident of Tranquil Repose, at the will of the Great Healer, aka Varos. This scene is utterly chilling. From the music to the level of disgustingly visible gore and pus, and everything used on Stengos' head to denote his transformation. Even the fact he starts speaking in the growing, hateful vocal form and will of a Dalek with the mental conditioning, while desperately begging to be put down from his half-life. It is intense. Eventually, Natasha agrees and shoots him, destroying the Dalek casing and assisting her father in his desired second death. I tell you, Colin Baker's tenure is just so grisly. Number 2. Sara Kingdom. Once again, we return to the Daleks' master plan, and it's the last act of the final episode where everything goes to hell. With the time destructor in hand, the Doctor decides to activate it in order to escape the Daleks and get back to the TARDIS, which is in the jungles of Kembo. He orders back Sarah and Stephen to the TARDIS, but only Stephen agrees, Sarah eventually going back to help him. Unfortunately, the device is what does Sarah in, as she rapidly ages into old age and perishes. It's honestly such a cruel demise, and we are only left with the telesnaps, so it must have been even more horrifying in full motion. And finally, number 1. Dr. Kerensky, City of Death. City of Death is one of the all-time greatest 4th Doctor stories, being in the prime of the Graham Williams era. Kerensky, a scientist working for Count Scarlioni, aka Scaroff, believed he was working to speed up the maturing process of livestock to feed humanity. Of course, he didn't know that he was actually helping Scaroff with his time travel experiments. Upon questioning this, Scaroff orders him to examine the field generator, but then he activates the machine. Over the course of several seconds, we see Kerensky age further and further until there's nothing left but a skeleton. Now this may look like a more modern version of Sarah Kingdom's death, but in this case, it's actually the novelization that has given the most horror, because it details that Kerensky lived through every single second of his demise. For a moment, nothing happened, and then for many years, nothing happened. It took Nikolai Kerensky the rest of his life to die, standing in the heart of his machine, looking out at those 4 faces staring in at him, all of them frozen, all of them unmoving, watching him. Once a year, one of them would blink. It would happen in turn like the changing of the seasons. Now here he was, trapped inside the accelerator while it was running, and completely unable to ever leave it. Outside the bubble, his life was racing past in the blink of an eye. He tried to imagine what that must look like, his features blurring, his limbs jerking, his hair growing long, his skin sagging. But inside the bubble, life went on at very much the same pace as usual. Nothing happened. Ever. In the end, Professor Nikolai Kerensky died of boredom. The last thing he saw was the face of Count Scarlioni, and that smile. That dreadful, lingering smile. Well, that was my list for the top 10 most horrifying Doctor Who deaths. What do you think are the most gruesome or psychologically impacting deaths in the franchise? Do you have a list of your own? Well, feel free to let me know in the comments section below. And of course, like and subscribe if you want to see content similar to this. So until next time, see ya!